Welcome to Trinity Radio. I was determined to be Braxton Hunter. And with me today is someone who is determined to be
Jonathan Pritchett.
And we are glad we were determined to be here with you today. Jonathan, what do you think the general suspicion of the crowd is here?
Oh, they've called it out. You lost.
So let me just go ahead.
You were determined to lose.
So let me just go ahead right from the beginning and thank you, Hervey Schmervy, for being a channel member.
Hey, welcome.
So glad that you became a channel. Whoops.
Yeah, you've hung around long enough.
Became a member. Yeah. Thank you so much. Now, and honestly, Atheist, I saw that you were asking some questions on Twitter that looked like they were prompted by, partly at least maybe, perhaps our last live stream or maybe the abortion video from earlier this week. Glad you all are all here. So here's what's going on. All right. I don't want to lead anybody astray, and I don't want people to, not that I know that anyone would do this, but in case there's anyone out there dumb enough to adopt a view just because I've adopted it, I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to go ahead and let the cat out of the bag here.
You lost.
I lost a weight loss competition with, now I'm going to watch to see if all of our views go away after this, but I lost a weight loss competition with Calvinist Chris Date. And I came up with the stakes of the weight loss competition. It was my idea. And the idea was, all right, Chris, what will motivate us? What will motivate us? I said, all right, whoever loses has to write, and I don't remember what I said, 1,500, 2,000, I don't remember. We'll have to find out. But I wanted to find out, I wanted to see whoever lost, if they could write a defense of the other guy's position on the issue of free will versus determinism.
Yeah. And
that very much motivated Chris Day because he won.
2,500 words. Yeah, and people don't need to bail out because, they thought that they were falling for what was obvious clickbait. But
I'm going to talk about determinism here.
Right. And so this is a good opportunity for people to see how well Braxton Hunter can steel man a position.
Yeah.
People need to know that because that's all we do here. We don't lowball anything except for fun, right?
Well, yeah, that's right. Chris Date says, I was not going to write a defense of libertarian free will, which I take him not to mean that if he had lost, he wouldn't fulfill the I think he just
that's
means,
not what he meant.
I think he means he was that devoted.
Yeah.
So, but I am gonna go ahead and, Chris can tell you if he wants to how much he lost, but he lost a significant amount. I lost a less significant, but still significant amount. I don't mind telling you about me. I lost 12 pounds, which isn't much. I'm probably doing it wrong.
Yeah, but, you lost some water and some glycogen.
You know what? This should be considered a part of Theology Geek Fitness.
Yeah.
There he put his information down there. But Jonathan, you should make this a part of the Theology Geek Fitness diet side of things.
Well, I mean, I try. Look. Clearly, Theology Geek Fitness is a niche, and while there are plenty of Christians who need to avail themselves of the content there, they just don't. So I mean, even though it is a niche, it's a niche that the people who need it the most have very little interest in. But we tried something similar. What, a year ago, 2 years ago, we tried to do the fitness challenges to see if Eric Hernandez and
that didn't work.
Chris Featherstone and even Leighton Flowers, those were the only people that I can recall that actually honored any sort of physical exertion in answer to a challenge, because Christian apologists and apologetics geeks and theology geeks and stuff
are out of shape
and
yes, lazy.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Brad from Carolina, who's been such an encouragement to this channel. All the glory to God. Much love from North Carolina. Keep up the great work. And you keep up the great work.
But there are others out there that are in our audience whose lives are being changed because they are taking health seriously.
We won't be lazy shamed, Dr. Prime. All right. And thank you, Hervey Schmervy, in addition to being a channel member. Thank you for that super chat.
Nice.
All right. So let's actually, so the idea is I'm going to write a 2,500 word paper. I will check our notes, Chris State, but I know you to be an honest man. And so I'm going to write that paper, and I think I'll enjoy it. My goal is to
write a proper defense of a view that should only belong to atheists.
To respond.
See what I did there?
But I'm going to respond in a way that as if I like was writing this to me, that I was going to respond to it as Free Will Braxton.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to respond as Determinist Braxton. And I'm going to try to really, really do a good job here. So we'll see what happens.
You've had a lot of interactions on the issue of free will and determinism with the people who properly hold determinism, once again, atheists. So it's not that far of a stretch to go from atheism to Calvinism, right?
Well, what they have in common is determinism, but Calvinists have theistic determinism. See, I'm already trying to take up for them. And in fact, let's just talk a little bit about some of the things that if I was being Calvinist Braxton right now,
right, instead of Christian Braxton,
I have a problem with.
See what I did there? I did it again.
I see. There's somebody who it's their first time.
Somebody said that somebody said on Facebook that they missed Fat Pritchett because Fat Pritchett slayed Calvinists. Yeah. So I just want to show that Skinny Pritchett can too.
You've just chosen a higher way lately. All right. Well,
I'm doing it because Chris Date beat you.
So
So I've got to be your. I gotta snipe back at Calvinism because you can't.
All right. So here we go. Chris Date's laughing at you instead of Christian Braxton. All right. So one problem that free will has that gets brought up in the literature is called the rollback problem, and that's the problem that these are some of the things that, from a philosophical perspective, I might focus on in writing this paper. Now, I plan to cover biblical data, philosophical content, theological things, that sort of.
Especially now that the word count's higher than you thought.
Cover it from multiple angles. But from the philosophical perspective, some of the things that might be considered is the rollback problem. Now, if you're not familiar with the rollback problem, you've thought about it and you've heard it discussed, even if you didn't know the term that's used for it. But it's the notion that, okay, if you believe in contra-causal free will, the sort of libertarian free will on the definition that says you could have done other than whatever you ended up doing. Do you believe that sort of libertarian freedom exists, Dr. Pritchett?
Of course I do.
Okay. Well, Calvinist Braxton doesn't. And Calvinist Braxton would
say... There's a part of non-Calvinist Braxton that's iffy about it.
Not this particular problem. But the rollback problem says that if we put you back in the same situation, like we just ran the tape backwards, and everything was the same. All your body chemistry was the same. Everything you were thinking about at that particular moment was the same. All of your desires and intentions and everything about you is the same. And all the circumstances that you're in of the world are the same, because you've just run things back, like rewind it. On what basis would one think that you would do something other than whatever you ended up doing? In other words, what changed between those two in a non-trivial way? What changed that if we ran it back, you might do something different? So that's actually a thing that comes up a lot. The simple answer from a non-Calvinist perspective is just to say the thing that was different was your choice, right? Because it's like
that's the whole thing right there. If you're,
if you say there had to be something else,
to go one way or the other, then either it can or it can't.
Yeah.
There's nothing about rolling it back eliminates the fact that it could have been otherwise.
Right. Yeah. But that seems not very sophisticated answer to a lot of people in the literature. And so we're going to.
It's not that it's not sophisticated. It's that it's unsatisfying to people who just can't get their heads around the fact that libertarian free will is a thing. So, I mean, there's a difference between sophistication of an answer or the simplicity. A more sophisticated than a simple answer doesn't make it correct. Like, oh, now it's more right because your answer is more complicated than a more simple answer. That's
right. It being more complicated doesn't make it more right. In fact, the simpler an explanation can be, the less there is to attack about it. But with this particular thing, it's more, one might say, well, hold on a second. In every realm of life, this sort of, with substances, let's say, because that is a difference from choices. But with substances, it seems that everything seems deterministic. It seems like everything runs on this, cause and effect sort of paradigm, and we can apply all these Aristotelian types of causation to it. and it's not really a problem. But when you start talking about choices, it's a little bit it's a little bit different, because the thing that makes it not satisfying to us is we're thinking, okay, well then if 100% of our experience of everything else in life says that there's cause and effect, such that something turned out a certain way because that's the way that it was determined to work out, then inductively we should look at human choice perhaps and say, that too should be considered in without any defeater to this. That why would we exclude that from causation just because perhaps it doesn't feel that way to you when you make choices?
Yeah. But it's a similar thing to, I mean, so you hear determinists, especially the theistic kind, who are trying to, I mean, for like Cosmic Skeptic and Rationality Rules, when they had their conversation about determinism, they got it right. Whereas if you listen to theistic determinists, right, they'll go on and say, now think of all the billions and billions and billions of free will choices that were made that had to lead up to this one thing that God had ordained from the blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, we'll make it trillions and trillions and trillions instead of billions and billions. So what?
Mm-hmm.
So what?
One thing I do
God's clever enough. Let's say free will is true. Okay, God's clever enough to still, or like, man, how did he get that one woman to show up at that particular time to melt that man? It's like, okay, well, let's say that determinism is not true. I can get somebody to show up. If I'm clever enough, I can get somebody to show up at a certain time at a certain place to meet a certain person that they don't know that I think that they would be compatible with, and I'm not God. Mm-hmm. And I don't need determinism to be true. Mm-hmm. How much? So when people try to overcomplicate it, and you know, like when Calvin think of all the millions and billions and billions, I'm like, okay, add trillions and trillions and trillions, trillions of choices since the dawn of time that led up to that one event. Mm-hmm. So what? You can compound that by a gazillion, and it doesn't change anything.
Well, one thing I appreciate about
making it more
naturalistic determinists that I don't see among theistic determinists
because they understand determinism
is well, the conversation there isn't, oh, maybe you're morally culpable anyway. Yeah. The conversation is maybe we should change our justice system to reflect the fact that people are not morally culpable or praiseworthy, which I think, frankly, is more consistent. But that's free will, Braxton. Let's go back to Calvinist Braxton. Okay. All right, another problem. And
determinist.
Determinist Braxton. It stands to be
You didn't agree to defend Calvinism. You agreed
well,
to
if you're a determinist and you believe in biblical inspiration, you've got limited options for a doctrinal perspective here.
Right. The Christian view or the Calvinist view.
But anyway, one of the biggest, if not the biggest, criticism from a philosophical perspective is what's called the intelligibility problem, which was playing a role in the rollback problem. But the intelligibility problem basically says, okay, look, Pritchett, when you make a choice, we know that there are desires in play, right? You don't even deny that. There are desires in play. You might even say you have desires in multiple directions with any particular given choice. So when you choose one thing over the other, it seems that whatever you choose, there has to be a you chose it because of something. Otherwise, it's random. Mm-hmm. If you didn't choose it because of some intention you had that you wanted to fulfill, then it's random. But then if it's not random, and random doesn't give you libertarian freedom because you lack control there. Yeah. On the other hand, you only are left with it's determined. And it doesn't seem like there's a space for anything else, because either something is motivating or whatever, that choice to a certain thing, your desires, your wants, or maybe there's not, but it's just random. But in neither case do you have control in the sense that the libertarian wants you to have it. Right. So this is one of the big criticisms, and it gets discussed a lot. Yeah. Do you have another overly simplistic explanation?
Well, I mean, our open theist friends, they don't care about that. I mean, they're like, yeah, there is randomness and chance. That's fine, you know, because.
But that doesn't give you control.
It doesn't give you control.
Right.
Well, you're still the one who acted upon that, even if it was as arbitrary as it could be. That instead of this. An open theist who doesn't believe that God has all knowledge can not only say, yeah, not only does that exist, but God doesn't necessarily know what particular choice. Now, open theists hash that out differently. God knows the
He knows all possible ways you might choose and the
and
ramifications of those.
and that's just as well as knowing it, you know,
Right.
because he knows it as possible or whatever. And so for you, the fact that you're doing something that is random, okay, so what? You did something that was random. No big deal.
Well, the point is
that's as simple as you can get.
That is simple, but it doesn't give you libertarian freedom. It gives you randomness. You don't even know what you're going to choose. Or, well, we'll get to another.
No, you know what you choose at the time of your choosing. That you know that you're.
I'm choosing this, but I can't tell you why.
Well, no, because even if it's random, as opposed to being,
if it's random,
you could still give reasons why that was your course of action.
You're going to say you could have reasons on both sides.
Yes,
and whichever one you randomly end up choosing,
right,
you can still talk about why that was the choice you made.
Right.
And okay, so now that brings us to the next thing, which is the argument that I co-opted from Robert Kane. Not the creator of Batman, but the philosopher.
I'm saying, is that a simplistic way of doing it? Just
no,
accepting the premise?
I don't think that's simplistic. I think that is
accepting the premise of randomness, as long as you can give informed reasons why. But you could do the same if you had chosen different. That's pretty simple.
It's simple, but I don't think that's simplistic. So let me say something.
It's not if you want to get into the metaphysics of how it can be the case, right?
Hey Danny, glad you're here.
That you can go either way and seemingly gives sufficient reasons for why you chose that course of action and could have done the same thing had you chosen differently.
Right? I'm going to actually give an example from science that I think might illustrate this for people better. Yeah. So Robert Kane, and some of you have seen a video I did on this. Robert Kane came up with this notion. He's a philosopher working on libertarian free will and committed to it and believes it's true, along with several others. Believe it or not, there are, I think it's like 13.7% of philosophers and graduate students working on philosophy believe in libertarian free will. And of course, that's not to isolate it to philosophy of religion. I'd really like to know what the philosophy of religion department says. But anyway, so Robert Kane says, all right, look, if you have, so we know that some randomness, or it seems strongly that randomness occurs at the quantum level. And so your typical Newtonian physics sort of doesn't seem to work the same way at that level. And so you get some randomness. It's not strictly deterministic, but it's also not, it's random. It's not and random isn't really what we want classically to defend libertarian free will, even if here you're granting it.
Well, okay? I am for the most simplistic.
And I'm going to grant it. Yeah. Robert Kane's going to grant it. Right. To say, all right, here's the deal. So most of the time, you're probably running on something like determinism. And frankly, free will Braxton kind of is fine with that, honestly. Talked with Tim Stratton. He seems fine with it too. The idea that like when I scratch my eye without thinking about it because I'm paying attention to something else, that might not have been a libertarian. That might have been a deterministic thing. It's the difference between picking and really choosing. Right? Like if I go up to the gas station and there's two double doors there and I grab one instead of the other, I don't have a problem saying determinism was probably at play there. I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't laboring over it. And the reason this is important is because Robert Kane wants to say that these quantum indeterminacies that are felt at the quantum level that we don't realize at the macro level of our everyday experience in choosing. Actually, if you have chaos in your brain, cognitive chaos, perhaps because of a choice that you're really struggling over, like where should I eat dinner? Now that I'm not picking that to be trivial or because I'm currently trying to lose weight, even something like that he thinks could cause the, or definitely who I'm going to marry, where am I going to go to school, that sort of thing.
Yeah, or asking your wife where she wants to eat.
Or where she wants to eat, and she'll always say no. But as soon as I mention something, as soon as I say McDonald's, she's going to say anything but McDonald's. Right. Not that I mean,
people can have an existential crisis over where they're, especially if you're asking them where they want to eat. So
could be some anxiety.
So yeah, it could trigger.
Especially on a first date, maybe.
Yeah.
But that is a
single people. Look at me being egalitarian. I said people, not guys. Mm-hmm. So. Guys or girls, if you're asking someone on a date, if you're going to ask a person on a date, and I know most of the time it should probably be the man, but if girls ask out guys, I don't really care. But look, if you ask someone out on a date, this is bonus content here. actually have a plan of where you want to take that person, because they're not going to care unless they have like an allergy that you didn't know about, that they don't want to go eat at a Chinese restaurant because of a peanut allergy or something. Plan the whole thing out and then see how it goes. So where do you want to go? That should not be the second question you ask once they've agreed to go out. Have a plan. There you go.
All right. Thoughts on dating from Jonathan Pritchett. All right. So, so those moments that
you should do that if you're married too.
Cain thinks, those moments that Cain, where you have libertarian freedom because of this chaos in your brain.
Yes.
This thing that's felt at the quantum level is magnified up to the level of your experience. Now, he would say this results in libertarian free will. Now, let me come back to that in just a moment, because I'll show you how in just a moment. But he says that these moments where you have libertarian free will are self-forming. He calls them SFAs, self-forming actions. And what he means is, then when you are running on determinism, you're still morally responsible, because the type of person you made of yourself that would make these determined choices was determined by the choices you made during your libertarian moments.
So when I go to a double door, right, at a gas station, and I have habitually used my right hand instead of my left hand to open the door on the right to go in, and that's because there have been prior decisions in my past that I had these IFAs to where I've conditioned myself to instinctively do that.
SFAs,
which is
yes.
SFAs. So which is why I think that I don't even know. So you could call it determined. It's still self-determined. And it's really, a better word for that is just instinctive behavior than it is deterministic behavior, because who determined it? You did, by all of your prior choices that were libertarian. So I don't even know, when you say when you're running on determinism. No, well, I mean, this is the same as running on instinct.
Okay, but you're right. You make of yourself the type of person that would have that instinct.
You've conditioned yourself based on prior free decisions.
Right.
Yeah.
So
over
so
time.
he says that. Now, how does he think that results in libertarian free will? Well, the reason he thinks it does is the same reason you gave with the rollback problem, which is, okay, so what the quantum indeterminacy does is create randomness. But what he thinks is important is to say, don't think of this as the thing that determines the choice. Think of it as an ingredient in that choice-making soup, basically.
Yeah.
Is there some indeterminacy there? Now, the comeback is, well, that does away with control, because if there's randomness and determinism both going on, it just results in a probabilistic outcome, but not control for you. But his response would say, what do you want when you want libertarian free will? What do you mean? You mean that you want, I could have done otherwise, right? Yeah. Which this randomness would result in that, even with the rollback issue. It could have been otherwise. And when it's chosen, it's not arbitrary. The person has reasons why they chose this over that. The example he gives is of a woman who is attacked by a mugger, but you're on your way to work, and you have to get to work for this important meeting that's going to determine the rest of your career. But on the other hand, you're torn because you want to stop this attack from happening. And so whichever thing you do in the cognitive chaos, you'll have reasons on either side. So whatever you do. Now, the problem that I plan to attack my own thing with this is because I buy Robert Cain for a naturalistic explanation of libertarian free will. Now, if you think that interferes with my argument that God would be required for libertarian free will, it would be because if that is the case,
that's how God created.
That is so incredibly unlikely that it would be like the best teleological argument for God's existence ever.
That's how God.
Because there's no reason that should be there. So that
that would actually work if you're more like Chris Date and a physicalist, though, and you needed a strictly material account.
If you were a physicalist but not a Calvinist like Chris Date,
right?
If you're a libertarian physicalist, you would need something like
Chris Date is not just Calvinist Chris Date. He's also a physicalist Chris Date.
Well, I know, but I wanted to differentiate what else is true about Chris Date from the person you're describing.
Oh.
And I think you're right. If you had a physicalist libertarian...
Joel Green is a Christian physicalist and an Arminian.
Okay. Then yes, he would need something like this.
New Testament scholar Joel Green.
Okay, so...
Or Nick Quint.
Or Nick Quinn. Believe it or not, folks, if you're not familiar, there are Christians who do not believe in the soul, but are physicalists.
Yeah. Another view that's more
How many
in
of me
line with
are there?
atheism.
Chris Tate says, how many of me are there? Yeah, I didn't say that was in line with atheism, Chris Tate. Jonathan Pritchett did. But
Yeah.
Chris Tate has some other views that are out of step with what a lot of apologists hold that are way more conservative than I think atheists would allow for.
Young Earth.
He's a young Earth creationist, for one thing. So
I'm proud that young Earth. I'm not a young Earth creationist, but I'm happy for young Earth. I'm not William Lane Craig, who is embarrassed by young Earth creationists.
I'm proud
that I'm proud of you guys still carrying the torch.
Nicholas says, I'm too interested in Chris Tate to leave now. Okay, good. So, all right. So that's a problem. But
become a patron. You can get hours of him after the show.
So I've invoked Robert Kane, among others, to try and resolve this problem.
Mm-hmm.
And I like doing that. And I think it technically ticks those boxes that you and I want ticked.
Yeah.
But I still personally think I could argue and want to see how well I actually can argue that gives up control of the sort that libertarians want. That's the box that doesn't get ticked.
Just sidebar real quick.
Okay.
Where actually are you going to publish this 2,500?
On the blog.
Oh, okay.
On the Trinity Radio blog, trinityradio.org.
Gotcha.
But then I'll share it everywhere so you'll get it. All right. Okay. So let's move on. So libertarian freedom at the loss of control. So that would be, you've got something like libertarian freedom, like what we're talking about, but that's at the expense of control, and in turn, control seems important for libertarian freedom. All right, the next thing that I might consider is how God knows the free will choices of individuals. How does He know? Would be a thing. So here's some options. Okay, either He just knows. We're just going to leave it there. I mean, and honestly, I don't see that as a problematic position to take.
How does existing by the necessity of your nature work?
Right.
Explain those mechanics. Don't tell me that He does. We all agree that He does.
What were the mechanics of His creating the universe from nothing, literal nothing?
Yeah.
What were the mechanics of that?
Yeah.
I don't know, but all Christians are committed to believing it.
Right.
And in the same way, it could be that, see, this is where you go to, I don't necessarily always have to know how something works to know that it works. I don't know the intricacies of how my truck works, and it barely does. But I turn on the engine and it works.
A champ. And the truck you sold me
beside
is
the point. Yeah. I don't know how it works, but it works. Okay. And I don't have to necessarily know how God knows free will choices to believe that He knows. But let's talk about some options.
Right. And you can listen to me and Tim Stratton and the episode we did on Trinity Radio Extra Molinism, where I hurl at Molinism some of the same critiques that I hurl at Calvinism, because as people know, I'm a self-loathing Molinist. And so the typical Calvinist will say, God foreknows because He foreordained. And go listen to that podcast, because I prattle off a litany of problems with that claim that pretty much dismantles any sort of belief in God's aseity that you can have, if you want to say that the reason why God foreknows is because He foreordains, because that just makes God slightly less ignorant than as far as knowing things than
you do when you see
open theists. But it's worse than open theism, because now not only is God just only slightly less ignorant than the open theist constructor, which open theists are fine with God being ignorant. I'm not using ignorant as in dumb, ignorant as in doesn't know. But then you have God's attribute being dependent upon God doing something. So now you have God having to do something in order to be something, but God shouldn't have to do in order to be, because His be is prior to anything that is due of God. So anything that God is prior to anything that God does. But you don't have that if God has to foreordain in order to know, which is He has to do in order to be, which is worse than open theism. But we hash all that out on Trinity Radio Extra. And Molinism, by the way, like Molinism, qua Molinism, suffers from that same problem, because they sandwich the decree between the middle knowledge and the free knowledge. It is for me, but you have to jettison.
You just say it's not middle knowledge. It's just something God knows.
No, you can keep middle knowledge. The mere Molinism.
No, you just can't place it middle, right? You can't put it in the middle on your view, because that means you have a problem with it being logically subsequent, right? You have a problem with him because you think even though it's logical and not chronological.
Yeah, I have a problem with the decree being logically prior to God's freedom. Alongside my
all
Arminian
that you disagree
brethren,
about is the placement.
along with my Arminian brethren. Yes, because that poses a problem. But because it means God has to do something in order to be something.
But it's the simplest thing in the world to fix.
And if God had not done, he would have never been.
But isn't it the simplest thing in the world to fix? Just don't put it there in the order of decrees, order of knowledge.
Yeah, but it's not like they just decided, I'm going to stick that there because I don't like There's actually a whole thing about this, that there's a reason why it's there, but it causes a lot of problems. And if you move it around, it causes a lot of problems. And our Arminians are out there saying, that's right, that's right. But Arminians can affirm a form of middle knowledge without buying into Molinism qua Molinism. And I think
let me make a big statement. First of all, I want to
Calvinism.
Mr. Green, I thought he was saying, at least the variety I want subscribed to. I thought he meant this is the type of show he wants subscribed to the channel for, but he means something else. But what I want to say about this is, listen to me, internet. Listen to me, Leighton Flowers. If you're an open theist, I disagree with you, but I understand why you won't buy into what I'm about to say.
Leighton Flowers is not an open theist.
No, I know. But if you're an open theist, you won't buy into what I'm about to say. If you're a Calvinist, you won't buy into what I'm about to say. But everyone who is not a Calvinist or an open theist, I think should buy what I'm about to say. And that is the defense of a mere Molinism in this sense. If you go up to a little old lady after church on Sunday and you say, ma'am, are you a Molinist? She will look at you like you are a three-headed donkey. But if you ask her, does God know everything that's ever happened and ever will happen and everything that's happening right now? She will say, of course.
And certain varieties of open theists could say that.
And if I said,
could say that.
They can't say what I'm about to say.
Okay.
If I said, okay, great. Does God know what would have happened, what you would be doing right now, if I had not approached you and started this conversation? And she would say, of course. And God knows everything. Ware. And then I would, and then I would say,
so would Calvinist Bruce Ware.
What?
And so would Calvinist Bruce Ware. He would say, of course.
Well, that's fine, but that's completely different. I'm glad he's a Molinist, but all that means is God knows all the way God could have done it. God knows all the ways he could have played with his action figures. I'm not interested in that. Okay. What I'm saying to the little old lady is, does God know that you would have gone out to your car and listened to the, K-Love or whatever? Well, that doesn't make sense. She's an old lady.
You said action figure. You're not supposed to be strawmanning today.
I know, but just let me get through this.
But
so
what you were supposed to say is it's not a straw man. That's what you should have said. That's not a straw man.
It's not a straw man that God determines, but it is a straw man in that action figures don't have wills and action figures don't have...
No, misses the point when you attack the analogy because you can't argue against the point of the
analogy. Well, that's what happens in Guillaume Bignon's book is he goes on
because
the very beginning attacking all the analogies.
His book is the best book on determinism, and it's still slop.
The best.
It's still slop.
Guillaume, that is the best.
Right, and Beyond is still slop. It doesn't do anything for your position.
Calvinist Braxton.
And so until you
Calvinist Braxton doesn't think so.
Until you show me that
Calvinist Braxton is on board with Bignon.
Okay, but I don't even know that Calvinist Jonathan would be, but it's the best book there is on it, and it just doesn't get it done. And until any Calvinist can sufficiently show me, and he did the best and came nowhere close, it's that it is actually a straw man. Instead of something so combustible like straw that it sets on fire easily, it's straw man. No, but it's going to be all day long. Puppets, action figures, robots. You're going to get nothing but puppets, robots, and action figures from us until you can prove it's actually a straw man.
Guillaume, you're my friend, I think. You should be friends with Calvinist Braxton. Challenge this man to a debate. I want to see what happens.
That means I'd have to care enough. I don't want to debate. I'm just saying I'm going to keep saying puppets and robots and action figures until somebody gives me a good argument.
Chris Date agrees, it sounds like, that he thinks the puppets and robots analogies are indeed fallacious.
Yeah.
Oh, no. He thinks he agrees with Bignon, they're fallacious.
Yeah, no.
He thinks it's like, let me tell you, Chris knows that he's welcome on the show anytime, and I'll bring him on right now if he wants to, but I know he's busy, so it's not his fault if he doesn't. But Chris agrees with Calvinist Braxton that it's like, actually, I'm agreeing with Chris. It's like, it's more like an author writing a story.
Yeah.
So it's not like a robot or a puppet. Luke Skywalker is not a robot or a puppet.
Mm-hmm.
Luke Skywalker is a free moral agent,
Right.
running around in the Star Wars universe.
Yes, and he's got
and if he
feelings,
considered
and
himself, he would say, I
Yeah.
am able to freely choose not to join the rebellion.
Right. But he's still George Lucas's action figure. In the sense that we mean.
In the sense that we mean. But I had a long conversation in Washington State with Chris Date about this, where he said, I get that your criticism is that in Luke Skywalker's case, he's determined by the author of the story, in this case, George Lucas. And in the robot's case, it's determined by its programming, whatever.
Yeah,
and in
both
cases,
out of metal. I don't believe humans are made. Therefore, it's a straw.
No, in both cases, they're determined.
Attacking the analogy instead of the point of the analogy, because you can't.
But he agrees with the point of the analogy that in both cases it's determinism, and that's. But he objects to the use of it because he thinks. I think because he thinks that it isn't a precise way of capturing how some Calvinists affirm that determinism taking place. But of course, I made clear to him that
goes back to
Free Will Bracky doesn't think that makes a difference,
right?
An important difference,
right?
Because
which is
in both cases they're determined, and the determinism is what we're bothered about,
right? Yeah. So it's just a puppet by any other name. Okay.
I don't know what this person says means.
I mean,
but they
Luke
say
Skywalker doesn't
Pritchett.
think he has George Lucas's hand up his rear, but he does. Challenge
Pritchett on objective evil. I don't know why someone said that. Chris Tate says, Trinity Radio, it's telling that JP insists upon sticking with his robot puppet analogy and won't just embrace the more accurate one of author story.
Because it doesn't bother Calvinists.
Oh.
Duh. Why do I say
Chris.
Puppets? Because I know Calvinists can get as the kids say.
But let's get back to this issue of how God knows the free will choice.
Only reason why I do. It's so fun to use out.
Okay, one way he knows is he just knows, right?
Yeah.
Another way he knows is he determines it. You do agree that if he determined all things, he would therefore know all things because he determined all things, right? If Calvinism is true, he knows all things.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's a possibility. Another possibility that I've heard open theists.
That just means Christian theism isn't true.
Open theism.
Or classical.
One thing that open theists sometimes believe, not all of them, of course, is that he predicts. God predicts. Now, not all of them do this. Some open theists will simply argue, no, the things that he prophesies about are fine for him to know because those are things that he's going to make happen in one way or the other. But some say, I've gotten at least one to say, with certain cases, yeah, he's predicting it. And I say, okay, and this is what I said. Could he possibly be wrong? Because if he couldn't possibly be wrong, it's not a prediction, it's a prophecy, and it's a claim to knowledge. But if he's predicting what will happen, along with that is the possibility that he's wrong, in which case God himself would be a false prophet. And the response I got was, well, false prophets are human. It wouldn't make God a false prophet, which I found ridiculously weak, right? It's like human beings can be wrong, and then they're a false prophet that you shouldn't listen to. But if God's wrong, he's not a false prophet. He's a false predictor, I guess, right?
Yeah.
But most open theists, I would say, no, God's not going to say anything that he doesn't know is true, right? And so when he predicts future events, it's because he's going to make them.
I know some open theists say, yeah, God's wrong on occasion. He got.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah.
So when you say open theists, I mean, there's a huge spectrum there. I mean, Greg Boyd as an open theist is not really anything like Chris Fisher as an open theist. So, I mean, there's a big chasm.
Derek Beeler says prediction by definition implies the possibility of being wrong. All right, so let's get to it. So maybe he knows it because he determines it. Maybe he just knows it, although that's not satisfying, as we've said. Maybe he predicts it, but I think that creates big problems for theology proper. Or, here's another possibility, perhaps some other theory of time besides presentism or the A theory of time is true. So maybe the B theory of time is true, because that way God could know. He would just... Now, you wouldn't like it, and really a lot of people wouldn't like it, because what that would mean is he observes and knows, even if that's a logical and not chronological thing. But if B theory is true, he could know it all because the whole time block exists simultaneously, logically speaking.
Well, but I mean, even there are B theorists who believe that God had all the knowledge of the time block prior to bringing it into existence, so it's not observable; it's still conceptual rather than perceptual.
But that would just be a person saying he just knows. We've already talked about that concern, right?
Yeah, but they wouldn't. But I mean, say as far as preserving classical theism.
Mm-hmm.
With B theory, you could say it's conceptual knowledge prior to the bringing time block
B
into
theory.
existence. But if you want to say, but if you want to say he knows because B theory is true, and he observed that instantaneously once the time block came into creation, some people, there's a lot of Christian philosophers that don't actually have a problem with that, saying that knowledge of all events wasn't had until creation came into being.
Idol Killer, who I think is an open theist,
Yeah,
says dynamic omniscience entails that God grounds his knowledge in his own intentions and actions and the intentions and actions of his image bearers. Well, now this, admittedly, I've not studied open theism to a great degree. I think I'm more aware of it than the average theology geek, but I understand the first half of that sentence, Idol Killer. Dynamic omniscience entails that God grounds his knowledge in his own intentions and actions. We've discussed that, in fact, on this episode. But how the intentions and actions of his image bearers, are you saying that when an image bearer...
He's reading them in real time.
Yeah, like he's picking it up like as it's coming, the information?
Yeah, he's the greatest conceivable observer.
Okay,
so
but he doesn't know
all
future
inputs at all.
But he doesn't know future free actions. He only knows, he comes to know as it's happening, like boom, 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 boom.
Yes,
right.
But dynamic omniscience is not opposed to the infinite chess player model of Greg Boyd either, that he knows all possible outcomes. So it's he knows it, he just doesn't know with certainty what it will be. So you can account for all contingencies. But he's saying the grounding of it is in the real-time observation of the intentions of the creatures as well as his intentions. Which
now I'll tell you what.
And in dynamic omniscience, God's intentions can stretch back prior to creation too, because those are his intentions with whatever he creates. So even, even if he decides, I'm going to create humanity, if humanity goes wrong, I'm going to account for that. He didn't have to, make it up on the fly as he goes, so to speak. Every point in human history, that's fine too.
Yeah, Skeptical Thinker is going through the video apparently further back. Just keep hanging with it, brother. We get there. All right. Now let's talk about another problem that I have. Something I'm going to go into, perhaps. Okay. So he perhaps on the B theory, someone could say he knows all things because, let's put heresies aside for a minute or anything like that and say he knows through observation. Okay. Or logically, he just knows everything on the time block. But on B theory, for those that don't know, A theory says that the past was real. 1960 was real. It's not real anymore. Not that it didn't exist. It did exist. It's part of history, but it's not existing somewhere right now. Right. And 2021 exists right now, but it won't exist in the future. And the future doesn't exist, but it will exist.
Right.
Like we're moving along a timeline, probably like you're used to thinking about it intuitively. The B theorist says, no, 1960 is real right now. Like if you had a machine, you could maybe go there. And the future is real right now. Right now. And if you had a time machine, you could go there. So on a B theory, but B theory means that the moment of choice, where you make a free choice, is already on the time block, logically simultaneously with all other moments on the time block. Not temporally, but logically. Remember, because they're equally real. Tim Stratton has an episode where he goes off about what this does to evolution if B theory is true. Because it's interesting, because most I think it's either most philosophers or most physicists. Maybe it's most physicists are B theorists, but they're also, of course, evolutionists.
Mhm.
But if B theory is true, then the end product of evolution existed. It's hard to talk tenselessly here, but logically simultaneously with the single-celled organism. And so it's like, when you look at the timeline, of course, it's causal, but Jonathan Pritchett, which is, of course, the highest in human evolution to date,
Thank you.
is existed simultaneously,
blush.
logically with all the other moments on the evolutionary time block. All right?
Yeah.
So that's a consideration. So what that would mean for libertarian free will is, do you really have libertarian free will if on the time block that already exists along with the prior things?
Of course, and then there's presentism.
It's not just that God knows it'll exist.
Yeah.
It's real already.
Yeah. But if you're a Calvinist, what you're going to say is God already knew and determined the entire time block prior to it coming into existence, so he didn't have to observe it.
Mm-hmm.
That's just the way the Calvinist sees time.
Right, because
independent
and
of
Calvinist
these
Braxton
issues.
says, yeah, man, you got to deal with that. So deal with it.
But you could be an atheist and a Calvinist too, because
Of course.
yeah.
I'm just saying, as we're looking at reasons to be a determinist,
Yeah.
one thing that could come up is
If
how
beef-
God knows the
Yeah.
future for reactions. And the choices are, he just knows,
Mhm.
determinism is true, he predicts it, or perhaps a theory of time, which allows him to know.
Yeah.
Now, free will, Braxton, the best explanation for me is this is archetypal. It's like ectypal knowledge is stuff we have access to. Archetypal is stuff we don't have access to. Like, how did God create the universe from nothing? Okay, you don't know. I mean, you always spoke it. Yeah, okay. But I'm talking about the mechanics of that. You don't know, and neither do I, and get over yourself.
Yeah.
And in the same way, when it comes to how does he know the future free choices of people,
Right.
he just knows because he's God. And that's part of what it means to be a necessary foundation of all reality.
That's what you mean by omniscience,
Mhm.
classical omniscience.
Mhm.
Anyway,
Which you can reject, but
we need to.
there's
thank
nothing
Scott
that now,
Heath.
but this is important when you're rejecting
More
it.
important than your $5, Scott Heath.
Again, this is free will talking. This is free will Braxton talking. Is
Thank you, Scott.
you not knowing how it happens is not an argument against it happening. But I can't remember what I was going to just say. What did you just say just before that?
Thank you to Scott Heath.
No,
for
before
the super
that.
chat.
Before that,
Huh?
right before that.
Oh, where I was talking about
I don't know. Forget
God
it.
knowing based on omniscience as opposed to just regular omniscience, knowing you don't have to know how.
Oh, I know what I was going to say. There's so when it comes to free will, this comes up a lot.
Mhm.
So someone might say your only options with the intelligibility problem, for example, are it was determined or it was random. And I would say, no, there's a third option. I chose it
Right.
freely.
Mhm.
And you say, but that doesn't seem reasonable. Well, is it logically impossible? Is it metaphysically impossible? Is it physically impossible? It doesn't seem so on any of those. It just seems that you are incorrigible about it.
Yeah.
But the fact is, it's not a contradiction. There's nothing contradictory about saying you are free to make real choices that are not random or determined. That there's at least no explicit contradiction, and I found no implicit contradictions.
I haven't either.
Now, what would be contradictory is what many determinist Christians do, which is to say, God determines all things. This is like the Arthur Pink. This is not the Chris Day or James White or whatever. This is the J.I. Packer type thing, which says
Not Arthur Pink. Arthur Pink is
you are determined as though
Arthur
you are not free,
Yeah.
and you are free as though you are not determined.
Yeah.
And like the pastors will say it this way: when you get to heaven, you're going to see on the outside of the gate, it's going to say, "All who will may come, and drink of the water of life freely," or whatever. Whosoever will may come. And then you'll walk in and look back on the gate, and it says, "You were chosen before the foundation of the world." And how that works, it's a mystery. And I'm saying hogwash. That's a
Right.
contradiction.
Yeah.
At least the way you mean it. Obviously, both of those passages are true.
Right.
But not the way you mean it, because of course we believe in corporate election, right? But
Yeah.
Anyway, so those
Well,
are
I mean,
some
Mullins
concerns.
would say, like Tim Stratton would say, he also believes in individual predestination
To service.
to salvation.
Who does?
Stratton,
What does he say about it?
huh?
It's not
Well,
what the Bible teaches.
huh?
It's not what the Bible teaches.
Well, of course. I mean, the Bible doesn't. The Bible doesn't even. There's not a. The word predestinate is a verb 6 times. Predestination makes it sound like there's an actual conceptual idea called predestination in the Bible, which there's not. Plutarch talks about people predestining times to get together to have a conversation, free inquiry. It's not a super duper word. So get that out of your head.
Yeah.
But no, Tim would say that, and I think William Lane Craig too would say, like, individually you were predestined, but based upon middle knowledge.
Yeah, I don't buy that.
Yeah, I don't either, because that's not what the Bible teaches.
By the way, I don't use middle knowledge soteriologically.
Yeah, I don't either.
It doesn't have anything to do with this debate about Calvinism. It's
Right.
just something I believe because I think it arises from good logic and Bible reading.
Right.
But when I come
People who
to
understand the Bible properly.
But the way I defend, when I come to predestination, and this is maybe partly because of my exposure to what you and your influences, Jonathan, over the past
the correct ones.
8 years or whatever. Now, come on, I'm saying something nice, but when I look at the Bible, what I want to know is, what did the original author mean, and how did the original people hear it? And it wasn't Calvinism, in my opinion. What they were doing was, like in Ephesians 1. Well, actually, let's table that, because I'm Calvinist Braxton today. And let me throw out some reasons why you should be, why Calvinist Braxton, who's not the deeper Braxton, the real Braxton.
The deeper,
the real Braxton. No, the real Braxton. No, the real Braxton.
Because Calvinism's so shallow.
That's not what I'm saying.
That's
what I'm saying.
Nice.
But Jonathan, I don't think you understand what the Bible says about this, or else you'd be a Calvinist.
That's true.
Genesis 6:5 tells us about man. Don't you know what the Bible says about mankind? What does it say about total depravity? Then the Lord saw the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually.
Yeah.
The only thing men think about, if this is taken to be all men, is awful things all the time. Jeremiah 13:23, can the Ethiopian change his skin, or the leopard his spots? Then you also can do good, who are accustomed to doing evil. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is more deceitful than all else and is desperately sick. Jonathan, your heart is black
who could
with
know
sickness.
it?
Your heart is black with sickness.
Yes. Who could know it?
Yeah. Romans 7:18, for I know that nothing good dwells in Jonathan Pritchett.
That is my flesh.
That is in my flesh, for the willing is present.
See, I don't have to
in me,
read these
but
verses.
the doing
like
of the good is not. All right, read Romans 8:7 and 8.
No, I'm just kidding.
Because the mindset on the flesh is hostile toward God, for it does not subject itself to the law of God, for it is not even able to do so. Leighton Flowers, you want your inability? Romans 8. And of course, the linchpin for total depravity, which just does everybody in. Ephesians 2:1-3. And you, Jonathan Pritchett, you, this is a plural you, all of you.
Yes.
We're dead in your trespasses and sins.
Yes.
What can a dead man do, Jonathan? Can a dead man get up and do jumping jacks and run around and believe the Bible?
If you're a Calvinist, you have to say yes.
Oh, that's true.
Yes.
So there's a lot
more. If
more.
you're a terrible exegete, you have to say.
I've got page after page.
Right.
Okay. What about unconditional election? John 1:12-13. But as many as received him, to him he gave the right to become children of God, even to those who believed in his name, who were born not of blood, nor of the will of the flesh, nor the will of man, but of God.
Yes.
Acts 13:48.
A verse that I appeal to in my defense that determinism is dumb in my debate.
Shut up.
I read that debate. I read that verse in my opening statement in defense of, because Calvinist exegetes, even the great commentators like D.A. Carson's commentary, don't understand what all that means. They have no clue what all that means.
Okay, Acts 13.
They have no understanding of
but you
kinship
can't
language
handle
and patronage
this.
language.
You can't handle this.
No
This
clue what that means.
proves theological determinism.
Calvinists should be embarrassed how they
And you're going to roll your eyes and you're going to act like this is so easy to explain.
I'm just
but
saying.
everybody knows
I'm saying
you can't
it now.
explain it.
Calvinists, you should be embarrassed about how you interpret all of these texts to try to make your case. You should be
Acts
embarrassed.
13:48 says, when the Gentiles heard this, they began rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord. And as many as had been appointed to eternal life believed.
Yeah.
How in the world these Gentiles believe? They believed because God did a work in their life. He appointed them to eternal life. He regenerated them so that they could exercise faith.
Arminians should also be embarrassed how they interpret that verse too. Haggling over Tassa. Oh, come on.
What about limited atonement? By the way, I've got a lot
If
more
you want to
scripture.
understand the Bible right, take all
Oh,
my
yes.
classes at Trinity. You'll get there.
Limited atonement. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the everybody? Or
No,
for
just the sheep.
Sheep.
The sheep.
I am the good shepherd, and I know my own, and my own know me.
You're doing
John 17:9. I ask on behalf. I do not ask on behalf of the world, but of those whom you gave me, for they are yours.
Yes.
This is the priestly prayer. He's praying for.
Right. He's not praying for the world.
He's only praying for those that God gave him out of the world.
Right.
Acts 20:28.
Well, and then he
Be
goes
on
on
guard
to pray
for
those that
yourselves
become
and
to
for
believe
all
they're
the
people that he
flock.
gave out of the world. But anyway.
For all the be on guard for the whole flock among which the Holy Spirit has made you overseers.
You
to
know
shepherd
what you're doing? You know what you're doing?
church of
You're just
God.
giving us another episode of a Calvinist podcast where you're just shotgunning proof
Yeah, but
text all day
here's the
long with
thing.
no
I'm
explanation.
actually going to write a paper, 2,500 words on this.
See,
and I will
this is how you're
include
padding your word
argumentation.
counts. Like, I'm going to give all of these proof texts to get my 2,500 words.
No, I'm
And
going to
just bam,
footnote.
look,
No,
Calvin, bam.
no. Are you an academic or are you an academic? I'm going to footnote that mess, and it's not going to be in my word count.
Okay.
Unless it's really long, like more than 5 lines, and then it'll be a
block quote.
Block quote.
4 lines.
Hebrews 9:12. And not through the blood of goats and calves, but through his own blood he entered in the holy place once for all, having obtained eternal redemption. Who obtained it? Did you obtain it by exercising your faith? No, it wasn't through goats and calves and other things that humans can do, but through his own blood.
Mm-hmm.
What about irresistible grace? John 6:64 through 65. But there are some of you who do not believe, for Jesus knew from the beginning who they were who did not believe and who it was that would betray him. And he was saying, for this reason I have said to you that no one can come to me unless it has been granted him from the Father.
John 6:65.
And then, of course, still with irresistible grace, you've got Acts 13:48. When the Gentiles heard this, they began rejoicing and glorifying the word of the Lord, and as many as appointed to eternal life believed. So, and then, of course, this is the last one, because I'm not going to go into perseverance of the saints. I'll just go into this one. Romans 8:30. And these whom he predestined,
He also,
he also called. This is the golden chain. This is the golden chain of redemption.
Amen, brother. Preach it.
And these whom he predestined, he also called. And these whom he called, he also justified. And these whom he justified, he also glorified. The same people that he predestined, he finished. If he begins a good work in you, he will finish it. Can I get an amen?
Amen, brother.
Time to play Just As I Am and have an altar call that no one's allowed to respond to. All right. Well, so let's do question and answer now, because we've been at this for a while. But I am going to write a paper, and I've been joking around and doing some tongue-in-cheek stuff here, but I actually am going to seriously write this as if I believe in determinism and try to produce the thing. I'm going to try to do what would convince somebody like me.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to do the best job of convincing myself. I'm going to do some indirect doxastic voluntarism on myself.
Yeah.
With Calvinism in view.
Yeah.
To choose what I believe. Well, I want to know if Warren is still here, and I want to know if Warren has decided to take away his thumbs down and add a thumbs up.
Who knows?
Oh, man. Brad from Carolina, I got to tell you, man. He says, as a Calvinist, I know I have free will, just no longer want anything to do with it. Okay, so Brad, here's the thing. I assumed you believed in free will. I'm talking Southern today, all right? I assumed you was going to believe
the Carolina
in that free
thing.
will, man.
This is what happens. My
Listen here, Brad
my
from
kids call
Carolina.
me out on it too. They're like, anytime you see anyone from back home or whatever, or they call you on the phone, how come your accent gets a lot worse whenever you're talking to folks from back home? Because you don't talk like that all the time, Dad. But as soon as you talk to your brother, it's like, hey, bing ding dong ding. You know, it's just like, get out the fiddles.
So Brad,
I don't know why it just happens.
Brad's a Calvinist.
Look, Brad.
And
listen here.
I thought he was going to be mad at me for this video when he saw the title, but he's a Calvinist. Now he's probably mad at me because I'm not a Calvinist. But I love you, Brad. Okay, questions and answers. If you have a question, just type question or tag me.
You know
so that
how
I'll
little.
see it.
All right. What? All right. So let's say you get to heaven, Braxton. I'm going to ask the first question today. You get to heaven. Not the new heavens and new earth, because when you get to heaven,
Wait, I didn't mean to put that up.
Unless Jesus comes back in the next 15 minutes, but when you get to heaven, you find out determinism's true. You're like, God, what about this whole thing? It's like, determinism's true.
If I get to heaven and I find out determinism is true?
Yeah. Different question than if you find out that Calvinism is true. But
I do find determinism is true.
Yeah.
What are you asking? What my reaction would be?
Yeah. Do you care?
As a triviality, once I'm in heaven?
Don't care.
Actually, I think I'll care. Maybe not day one. Day one, I've got a lot of stuff to check out and a lot of people to meet.
Yeah.
But day 5,072, do I find Jesus or Paul and be like, what the heck, man?
So if Jesus, before you get to heaven, Jesus comes down to you in a vision and says, Braxton, determinism's true. You find out now.
If he tells me now?
Yeah. You okay with it?
No, I'm not okay with it.
So
there's already things I don't believe that I'm okay with. I mean, there's already things that I do believe are true about Christianity that I'm not okay with.
Right.
What that means is I wouldn't have done it that way, but he's God and I'm a guy from Indiana.
Right.
And it's his business. So I'm going to worship him and say he's right in everything.
Right.
But in terms of like, from my intuitive, like how I see this, what do I think about it? I'm not like okay with it in a colloquial use of the term.
Right. And we've said things like that in the past on this show, that we care about certain things because God does, but if God didn't care, we wouldn't either, right? Or we believe certain things because God does, even if otherwise we wouldn't hold to it. So for me, here's the thing that I come back to, though. If I found out determinism is true, I don't know that I'd actually be bothered with as much as you would, because you have to think for yourself. And this is where Calvinists are kind of wondering why we don't get it. How would your day go any different? How is your day affirming LFW any different than Chris Dade's day is affirming compatibilism? I mean, you get on with your life and you engage the world the way that human beings engage the world. So you believe in libertarian freedom, but how does your phenomenological experience any different? So if I found out determinism is true, I don't know that I would actually, I mean, philosophically, there's problems that I would wrestle with, but I don't know how much I'd care because it was always true.
Well, in an everyday sense of the term,
your experience is not any different.
Well, yeah, but in the everyday sense of the term, you might react to things a little differently if you believe that it's all determined. For example,
we straw man Calvinists all the time. This is actually a straw man, as if Calvinists could say, well, unless you're Zachariades, like God tells him to commit adultery whenever he wants to. It's like, well, when I cheated on my wife, it's because what God wanted. He ordered me to. But Calvinists don't normally walk around saying every time that they sin, well, I was determined, so we'll see what punishment I was determined for, and then we'll get on with it. I mean, Calvinists don't act like that, right? Mm-hmm. They actually, whether or not you can say, yeah, but they were determined to feel bad about their, conviction. They were determined to feel shame about their sin. Well, okay, well, whatever, they still feel it. So it's not like they're walking around excusing themselves for all their sinful behavior. Well, God determined that, so who cares? Right? So I mean, when you think about
however they do it, they have moral culpability, and it's the way they do it is they have two.
Right. So how does it really change the way you think about things?
Because
unless unless you're willing to say, yeah, determine who cares. Yeah, right. Determine who cares. Yeah, determine who cares.
Let me just
unless
tell you
start thinking like that for real.
You want me to blow up our whole channel, make everybody hate me? Here it comes. Yeah. I'm talking about even the Arminians.
Okay.
You'll defend me because I know you believe it. But when I go to a church, like I did last weekend, by the way, in Jackson, Tennessee, Soul Quest Church, when I go there, I preach. Every second of the sermon, Pritchett, I am trying to persuade, like the Bible says Paul did, all over the book of Acts, before and after the Acts 17 event. I'm trying to persuade. Stay with me here. I want you to hear this. And when I get to the end, Jonathan, unless the pastor tells me otherwise, I give a good old-fashioned altar call. This is why everyone's going to hate me. And you know what I do? I have them bow their head and close their eyes.
Awful.
If they recognize that they're a sinner and need Jesus and don't have him, I have them raise their hands. And at the end, I don't force them. I don't go grab them by the hand. I don't guilt them. I just say, if you want Jesus today, then I want you to go talk to one of those counselors.
Man, David Platt is screaming right now with your
and I'm happy to talk to David
blah.
Platt. David Platt, if you ever see this, don't think you will. We can have a good conversation about this. And guess what? I respect you infinitely, David Platt. But
your whining is dumb. We have old podcasts on that. It just
but here's the point I want to make. I am struggling. I am in the midst of that sermon. I even if I'm not like preaching like athletically, I'm sweating. I'm preaching. I'm reasoning. I'm thinking of things to say on the spot in addition to what I prepared to say. Why? Because I think people's souls hang in the balance, and it matters how will they hear without a preacher, and it matters how the preacher preaches. Now, when I leave there, I'm bothered sometimes. In fact, my wife had to tell me, you've got to relinquish it, because I'm constantly thinking, obviously the Holy Spirit's involved, but did I say what God wanted me to say? Did I do what God wanted me to do? That's how I function. If I were a Calvinist and I knew that it was all determined, it's not that I wouldn't still recognize I have a command to be evangelistic. I might not do it the way that I do it, and that might be better. I don't know. But I don't think so. And I think the reason I do it is because I really think they can make the wrong decision, and what I say here matters.
Yeah, so what? Over 7 years now of being around Braxton Hunter. When he preaches, people get saved. When I see other preachers, Calvinist or not, preach, a lot of people get saved. Mm-hmm. So someone could say, well, that's just the gift of evangelism, and God cleans up whatever's sloppy about your. But I don't think so. I don't think that's it, because you preach like you believe God has a purpose in you bringing people to know Him and stuff. And I guess the other thing would be, Braxton. Well, of all those people that raise their hands and come forward, how many of them are really Christian?
Let's say,
justification isn't believing in Christ. Justification is how much you meant it when you did.
That's the question.
Yeah.
That Asahel
Which I think is stupid. It's, do you believe?
I'm going to teach you some history, Jonathan. Are you ready to learn?
Yes, please.
This is what Asahel Nettleton asked of Charles Finney. And do you know what Charles Finney said?
What?
Asahel Nettleton said, do you really think that all of the people that came forward really became Christians? And he said, no. He said, do you think 75%? He said, probably not. So what about 50%? Probably not. What about 25%? Do you think 25% of the people that responded at your altar calls really became Christians? Yeah, probably 25%. And 25% of 1,000 is 250. That's pretty dang good. How many people have you led to the Lord this year? Right? Yeah. That was his response.
Look, I think you have to believe. I don't think you should believe in vain, but of course that's present ongoing. For me, because I'm not a once saved, always saved person, but I don't think your salvation has been on, things that are unknowable. How much did you really mean it at the time? Like when you tell people who apostatize, you obviously didn't mean it enough that whole time you believed, because that's why I don't buy into that. Some people I think are not saved at altar calls. Some people are just having a thing.
Sure.
But I believe that actually probably more than its critics think, but less than its most ardent defenders think.
Okay. I've got questions here from atheists, agnostics, Calvinists, and this is going to be fun. But first up, thank you for this super chat, Derek Beeler. You really are a blessing to this channel. And he says, being as fair as you could, is there any decent Calvi answer to the fact that I will only be a Calvinist if God determines it, so take it up with him?
That's the rational. Can you be right? That's just another way of the rationality.
Yeah, but I think if I'm going to answer as Calvinist Braxton. So Calvinist Braxton would say to you, God uses means. And so it's not just about taking it up with him. Me interacting with you as a Calvinist may be the way that God has determined for you to become a Calvinist. So yes, you're right. You'll only become a Calvinist if God determines it. See, I'm a real Calvinist. I'm not like these phony flag waving Calvinists. Oh, where did I get that? And no, it's you'll be a Calvinist only if God determines it. But it may be that he determines you not to be a Calvinist or to be a Calvinist by bringing you into contact with Calvinists.
Right,
like Calvinist,
that's the means by
like
which,
Calvinist bracket.
That's the means by which your mind is convinced.
Thank you, Magnino Alex. So appreciate you.
Yeah, we love Alex.
Appreciate you so much, brother. All right. Danny, I think this is an agnostic philosophy major. He may be an atheist philosophy major. And he was responding to someone else, but he says, I just don't see what atheism has to do with free will. It's not a thesis about that topic at all. So the reason that atheism and free will come into conflict, and you're right that it isn't necessarily the case. Like, is it philosophically possible? Let's say logically possible, physically possible, metaphysically possible. It seems possible to me that you could have free will on naturalism. But it is the frameworks for how that might happen are so ridiculously unlikely that it seems like it would require design from God.
Right.
And
but
so
if you are an atheist, you're going to high probability that you're
a determinist.
Yeah. And well, no, I was going to say if you're a naturalist, you're probably also an atheist, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't met any that weren't. So what does it have to do with atheism? Well, in the sense that a naturalist would want to give a free will defense, they're also an atheist, right? Because, I mean, naturalism is obviously...
They would have to come up with a way that libertarian free will, is feasible on naturalism. Right. I think the best attempt that's been made is Robert Cain,
who is an atheist.
And I think that his position is so unlikely that it would be the best design argument ever. So typically what people will say about this, some atheists and many Christians will say, if you believe you have libertarian free will, the only way that happens is if the supernatural is real and God's real and all that. Now, to the question of, well, even if God's real, does that make libertarian free will more of a possibility? That's a deeper question that will be part of the subject of my paper. So, but anyway, thanks, Danny. I'm so glad you're here. I like Danny. Danny's pretty cool. All right. Idol Killer deserves to be seen. He says,
and go subscribe to his channel.
Any position apart from fatalism entails a degree of openness. The vast majority of Christianity holds some degree of openness. I agree with him because the people in the pews tend to speak as though God is open and produce literature as though God is open but honestly, it's because they're anthropomorphizing their relationship with God.
Yeah.
But I don't hold any degree of openness in the sense that you mean it. I don't believe that God in any way does not have exhaustive foreknowledge of all past, present, and future events. But I'm open to learn because, like I said, this has not been a focused area of study for me. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Well, it's like, like Calvinism, though. There's no one. That's why he says, well, at some point there's a degree of openness or fatalism. Of course, I mean, sophisticated theologians in the Arminian or Molinist camp have responses to that.
I think, like, I appreciate what the open theist is trying to do. Because if you just take the plain reading of the text, not that that's what all of them do, but if you just take the plain reading of the text, open theism is true. Right. So I get that. I get that there are a lot of passages that seem definitely to teach open theism. It's just that there are further considerations about why they're phrased the way they are. Honestly, Atheist says the implications here being that you need to know enough about how he knows to know that the proposed mechanism is possible. So here's the thing. I have on the table this claim that God knows all God has exhaustive foreknowledge. He knows all past, present, and future events.
Mm-hmm.
I need to be presented with a reason to doubt that. Because the reason I accept that, honestly, atheist, and this is important from an epistemological perspective, and you wouldn't know this about me, so it's not like you should have known this. I'm just telling you, for me, and I think for Pritchett, I have good reasons to believe that God exists. You may not think that I do, but I think I have good reasons to believe that God exists. I have good reasons to believe that Jesus rose from the dead, and I have good reason to believe that the gospel authors are trying to tell me the truth, and we're being responsible in how to do that. And from there, in other streams, I've built out why I then feel like I can trust the whole of the scripture. Now, but then when it comes to God knowing all things, I already think I can trust the scripture. So if it implies that God knows everything, then God knows everything. What I need to know there is it impossible? No, it's not impossible, or at least there's no obvious contradiction, whether philosophical or logical, metaphysical, physical, impossible. There's an obvious impossibility there. So I believe it until someone shoots down why I should believe the Bible, or shows me some implicit contradiction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even know if we buy that. Now, I don't know enough about theories of abiogenesis and all this other stuff to think, well, other than just, well, we know that it must have happened, so here's any number of things that actually don't work. But how does that give you any closer to understanding the mechanisms of how it could at least be possible? Nobody's anywhere on that. And consciousness is another just thing that we're out to sea on. So but we don't have to know how consciousness could have arisen to know that it did, right? And we don't have to know how it is the case that there is consciousness to know that there is the case. So now you can say you can give all the explanations you want to about neurology and evolution and all that. But as far as we've been going down that rabbit hole, nobody's anywhere on that. Basically, where I see it, no one's anywhere on even explaining how, other than just tossing out, well, evolution somehow. Okay,
and here's something that I think of so often. I'm glad I thought to say it right now. Is when I watch atheists speak, when it comes to questions of science, like quantum physics or whatever, or multiple universes or string theory or the Higgs boson, it's all whoa. That stuff is so beyond what me and the average person know about this. I don't even think we're capable. We shouldn't even be talking about it too much, but here's what the scientists say, and they're the ones with all this knowledge. Hold on a second. Think about that and apply it to if a God does exist. Now, I know that for most atheists, not honestly atheists, not some of the others that are friendly here, but when you think about God, don't think of the Sunday school caricature of God. Think, what if I found out that God exists just as surely as I believe that the earth beneath my feet exists, and that we can find out truths, although we don't find it out scientifically, we find it out philosophically or historically, whatever. But if you think the Higgs boson is beyond your ilk to understand, or multiple universes, or quantum mechanics, and then you think that all of the answers about how God works and how God functions and how God brought the universe into existence and how he knows everything should just be this easy, simple answer, that's not realistic. You don't think that way about anything else that you consider to be pretty heady. And if God exists, he's God. He's the creator of all that physics.
Right, which is why I don't have to have a clue how the mechanics of omniscience works any more than I have to have a clue how existing by the necessity of your own nature works, and having not been. How does that work? I don't know. I don't much care either, but I don't have to know how. I just know that.
What you do have to know, Pritchett, is how to answer this question.
Well,
Tyler Folsom says, Pritchett, are you making a distinction between Christian philosophers and theologians? This seems to be more of a theological discussion than a philosophical one. I may be reading too much into this.
I don't remember what that was in response to, but I'm talking about both. Look, theologians are philosophers. They just don't like the fact that they're philosophers because they're usually bad at philosophy. But exegetes are philosophers because you can't do exegesis and engage in hermeneutics without a philosophical underwriting about how to go about that task. So it's philosophy all the way down. So yes, I'm not
Okay.
I make no distinctions between those. But you can just talk about good philosophers and bad philosophers, because theologians and exegetes at some level have to have a philosophical underwriting for why they do the things and the methods that they use, why they choose those as opposed to other methods. So yeah, I mean, it's all, that's a meaningless distinction.
Well, thank you for this super chat. Scott Heath says, on B theory, does God know what is going on now? Yes.
Yes.
If yes, his knowledge is always changing. I don't see how. Maybe you mean, well, but see, on the B theory, what's happening now
is all things.
Kind of, yeah. And so the idea is, it's not that he's gaining new knowledge about anything. He knew everything that was going to happen. I think what you're saying might be something like, okay, but if he knows that right now this is happening, like he knows the whole timeline, but he knows that right now X is now happening, Y is now happening, then he would know something about, there would be some new knowledge, because it wasn't true that he knew what was that X was happening now yesterday, because it wasn't happening now.
Right.
But that just has to do with how we understand God's omniscience. God's omniscience is God knows all, well, okay, not the open theist understanding of God's omniscience, but the classical understanding of God's omniscience is that God knows all true propositions. God knows the truth value of all propositions. No open theist
holds to B theory that I am aware of.
I've never met one. But
it's either A theory or presentism. I've never met a B theorist open theism.
So that's the end of our questions that we've gotten that I saw. Let's see. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
I mean, it's got to be, hey, Trinity Radio, such and such, or we just kind of miss it.
So here's what's going to happen. In a minute, we are going to end this stream. But don't go away. Really, listen just for a minute. In a minute, we're going to go over to the Patreon, and there are links. Oh, I didn't put them in this stream. But Jonathan, talk about something for a minute.
Yeah, while he's doing that, what we do is
tell them what they're going to get.
You're going to get probably us and anyone who wants to jump in, and we'll continue the discussion over in the Facebook Patreon group where we'll be streaming.
What are they getting from you recently?
Huh?
In the Patreon group.
Oh, our patrons are actually getting a full resurrection course, aren't they? From me?
You.
Yeah.
And 2 more episodes coming today.
Yeah. So if for those of you who missed Old Pritchett, you get Old Pritchett and Spades in that, because it's an older Trinity course that I've got to re-record because it's a little bit dated. I don't, not that it was ahead of its time, so there's not a whole lot to update, but there is some. Plus, I look like a different human being now. So we've put that course in the Patron feed. And so if you're interested in learning about the resurrection, and you don't want to have to read N.T. Wright's book, and you don't want to have to read Mike Licona's book, even though you should read both books because it's good to read books, this course is a good, solid overview of all the things that you'd want to know from the best scholarship on the resurrection. So you get that for being a patron, and you get to listen to us keep prattling on a Friday afternoon in the Facebook group.
So, and I'm releasing next week the 3rd episode. The other 2 are already available in a series on how to do apologetics online. So this is something that you might check out. Now, if you refresh the page you're on in a few moments, you'll see that there are 2 links at the top. There's a link to the Patreon page where you can become a patron for as little as $1 a month. And then you can go, and then there's another link there to the Facebook page that we have just for patrons. And that's where we're going to do a live stream in just a few moments after we get done. We're going to wait 10 minutes. We'll say that we'll get there at about 2:35 maybe, or 2:40. Let's just say 2:40. And so you'll want to be there for that. But it's been a blast with all of you. We'll take one more question, and I'll go ahead and start the music while we take this last question.
Honestly, atheist, my answer, of course, is yes. If even though theism is still possible in determinism, I think that naturalism is determinism is more likely on the naturalistic thing.
I think so.
So yeah, I totally grant that. If it was shown to me that determinism,
and Calvinist Bracky says that's right, but free will Bracky, the real Bracky, the deeper Bracky, says ain't no way. You got free will, man. Try to live as though you don't. And we'll see you next time on Trinity Radio.